Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi, your Archduke of Banterbury, and your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, robcasting at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. And wouldn't you say the greatest community on the web? I'd say so. If you're interested in science fiction, fantasy, horror, in all of its myriad forms, movies, video games, music, television, model kits, action figures, whatever, this is the place to be. And I got to tell you, we've got the greatest community because you imagination connoisseurs make it so. This is, of course, Robservations, a show about something. Robservations episode number 368. And as the world around us gets stranger every day, I am here to report on the great goings-on. Let's face it, it doesn't matter what's happening in the world around us. We all still need our hopes and dreams. And what better place to find dreams than in flights of fancy, in escapism? Because you can deal with the real world half the day, and you can escape into flights of fancy the next half of the day. So, and then you have to go to bed, and your dreams are full of, whatever your dreams are full of. And I hope they're full of what we discuss each and every day here. So welcome to you new subscribers. Welcome to anybody that chooses to join us. You're all welcome here. All I ask is that you respect the rights and the opinions of everyone else that's here too. Anyway, this, man, I'll tell you, I've never seen anything quite like this. I've seen movies like this, I think, but nothing ever quite like this. It's wacky. It is wacky. I will say this. It's really nice to have a large collection of physical media to while away the hours, if that's what you want to do. While? Do you say while away? Winnie away? What's the word? I don't even know. But anyway, I'll tell you, I read an article today in the Hollywood Reporter that was quite distressing. And I want to start off by saying one of the things that's happening in the country, besides, of course, people dying and being infected with the new COVID-19, which is horrible and awful, but the economic impact of this on all forms of the entertainment industry it's pretty severe and pretty dire. And my heart goes out to all of my fellow entertainment industry workers, whatever part of production you are in, whatever you're doing to make a living, it's a good bet that has been completely curtailed. And the entertainment business, basically, it was like someone turned off a light switch to all of the entertainment business. And I don't think, even during a writer's strike, this seems even more drastic, because even during the writer's strike, there was things that were happening on the agency side, and you could still, raise money to make movies and figure out how to do something. I'm lucky in the sense that right now I'm producing, as you all know, special features for the Blu-ray special edition of The Hills Run Red, a horror film that I produced for Warner Premiere and Joel Silver's Dark Castle Entertainment. So I have things that I'm working on at least for the next week, and then everything's going to be delivered. Then I will have nothing, no income, nothing going on. There's always something more to do, but it's crazy. But one of the areas of the business that has been hardest hit has been the direct market for comic books. And everybody, as you know, the comic book industry works mostly through the direct sale market. And what is the direct sale market? The direct sale market are comic book stores. And comic book stores, there is one distributor, Diamond, that distributes comic book stores from all the big comic books companies: Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, IDW, Boom Studios, Image, and you get your Dynamite. You get all your comics from Diamond. You place your orders with Diamond, and then when the comics come out, you get what you've ordered. Now, the thing about the direct sale market is, once you have put in an order for those comic books, you don't get to return them. If they don't sell, you're stuck with them. So whatever monies the stores spend on their inventory, they eat it, unless you go and you buy those comics. And this is a business that basically gets a shipment in, let's just say once a week. They can get other shipments in if they need to replenish, but once a week, usually on a Tuesday, say, or maybe one Monday, whenever they get their shipment for the week's books, they get their shipment, they put the week's books out, and their customers come in, and they do most of their business on New Comic Book Day. And New Comic Book Day, traditionally Wednesday. If you don't go into those comic book stores, they eat what they've purchased. And right now, with everything shut down, comic book stores are not open. And like movie theaters, there isn't a huge margin in comic book stores. The people that run comic book stores are passionate about comic books. The late, great John Schnepp, who I used to do Collider Heroes with, I don't think anybody in the world loved comic book stores more than John Schnepp. And of course, Amy Dallin, who I also did Collider Heroes with, she worked at House of Secrets, and she's one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met about current comic books and what's going on. And she also was incredibly passionate about comic books and comic book stores. And it was great. Between the two of them, it sort of reignited my interest in the direct sale market. And I went every week to comic book stores for the better part of 30 years of my life. Well, one of the things that is a byproduct, the fallout from this situation that we all find ourselves in, is comic book stores are literally facing, this is an extinction level event for comic book stores. And this is not hyperbole. There's no way. How do you stay open? Unless you have deep pockets, and very few comic book stores do. Jacob Fudge, who is a member of the Post-Geek Singularity community, since I've started this show, he is a comic book retailer in the Midwest. He opened his own comic book store. And we've never met, but we've conversed. And I think about him a lot. I think about realizing your dream of opening your comic book store. And he'd shared when some of his friends had shared the uplifting story of how it was all hands on deck that helped him open this store. I think about him all the time. And how is his comic book store doing? He's even offered to buy my comic books. And if there's some way I could do it, I feel like shipping him my entire collection, donating. Not that my collection's worth a lot. It's a lot of 80s and 90s comics. But he could put them out. I don't know. I don't know what he could do because he probably can't be open. But if there's any way I could help out and keep his store afloat, I would. But comic book stores, if they don't have their customers, they're in a world of hurt because they've already placed their orders. And I have to say that in a first, Ross Ritchie, who basically was the founder of Boom Studios, one of the great indie film companies. Movies like Two Guns were based on a book he publishes. Ross Ritchie got right out in front of this and said, again, comic book companies aren't working on huge margins either, but he got out in front of it and said he was going to give some kind of relief to comic book stores and offer a certain return on product. He couldn't obviously make it 100% because he's got a business to run too, but kudos to Ross and Boom Studios for getting out in front and doing whatever they can to make sure that at least the retailer market that the retailers know that there are people at the comic book companies that are thinking about them. So kudos to Ross Ritchie for doing that. There is an article in today's Hollywood Reporter that was published at 4:57, I guess, p.m. It hasn't hit that on the West Coast yet. Well, it was published yesterday, actually. The article's from yesterday, from 4:57 p.m. I thought it was today. It was yesterday. But I wanted to share it with all of you because it's something that, it's on my mind. And the headline is, Coronavirus Lands Thanos-Sized Punch on Comic Shops. The specialty comic book market is facing something that could, without an appropriate response, prove decimating to the industry as a whole. We have reached the moment we have been dreading, said the email. It was from Ed Greenberg, the owner of Collector's Paradise, the comic shop which has 3 stores in the Los Angeles area. In an email to his customer base, he was reacting to Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti's Safer at Home emergency order, which was unveiled Thursday and mandated non-essential services close. I would argue that comic books are not non-essential services. We imagination connoisseurs need our fix. We've been selling comics for close to 26 years now, and this is truly the first time that we are uncertain about the future of our store, our industry, and our favorite art form, continued the email, which in many ways summed up the precarious state of the comic book retail business. Even before the coronavirus pandemic, comic shops have been struggling to reinvent themselves as sales slumped, but with social distancing, self-quarantining, and the effects of COVID-19 changing the way the world works, the specialty comic book market is facing something that could, without an appropriate response, prove decimating to the industry as a whole. Comic shops are already in the process of adapting this week. When the Hollywood Reporter stopped by Los Angeles' Golden Apple on March 18th, it had limited its hours, with its staff wearing gloves and sometimes masks. It had also limited the amount of people it let into the store and even set up a comic book car hop. But this latest news packed a Thanos-sized punch. I would have said Thanos-sized snap as I did in my... I guess a punch is not quite as definitive as a snap. But anyway, as of Friday, all of California and New York are under statewide shutdowns of non-essential businesses. Illinois also followed suit. As the full extent of the virus continues to be felt across the country, a good bellwether for how things might turn out for comic shops is Northern California, where retailers have been dealing with an enforced shutdown of their storefronts for a week, without knowing whether or not publishers would continue to release product and bill stores for it during the shutdown. I sent an email to my top 5 suppliers asking if they're going to be offering returnability on the other end of this. I have 3 weeks of orders in the pipeline and zero ability to sell those books in a meaningful way. Longtime California retailer Brian Hibbs wrote on Facebook at the start of the week. By the way, Gary Beekler, Nerdrotic himself, was also reporting on this story earlier than I was. And he's, of course, also very passionate about the comic book industry. He was a comic book retailer himself for a decade, and he has stated on his show recently that he would like to someday get back into it, which I hope he does, because I want to go to his comic book store and hang out and talk comics with him for hours and hours and hours. Longtime retailer Brian Hibbs wrote on his Facebook at the start of the week, ahead of the enforced closure of his 2 stores, 2 of the 5 ignored me, and the other 2 gave me really, really dark answers, and it's clear they're using each other as excuses, and only one, Image, stepped right up and said, yep, returnable for now. I also want to point out that after, I believe, Brian Hibbs wrote this, then Ross Ritchie, at least I saw it on Facebook, posted that Image was going to help out retailers with a return policy. It's probably only 80% of the reassurance I want, but at least it's something. Guidance from both publishers and central distributor Diamond Comics distributors have arrived through the week, albeit in evolving, often contradictory, piecemeal fashion. Plans for May's Free Comic Book Day event were initially expanded for the entire month before being indefinitely postponed a day later, for example. As Hibbs' note suggests, Image Comics was the first publisher to step up, making all new releases fully returnable for the next 2 months and staggering or canceling some releases. Industry leader Marvel released a statement Friday announcing its own plan for assisting retailers with what is being described as extensive, deep discounts for releases between March 18th and April 8th. As we all encounter new and uncertain challenges in response to COVID-19 and take extraordinary measures to prioritize the safety and well-being of everyone in the industry and beyond, our thoughts are with the entire industry and community we all support, said Marvel Entertainment President Dan Buckley in the statement. We have spoken with many retailers about the economic impact to their stores from this situation, and we are here to help. DC, at the time of this writing, has yet to release its own statement. The Hollywood Reporter reached out, and a spokesperson confirmed that the publisher is working on a meaningful plan to help alleviate current stresses on the comic book industry, and that communication to retailers is forthcoming. Indie publisher Aftershock Comics has suspended new releases for 4 weeks, while Vault Comics has suspended them through the end of April. Boom Studios announced it will stagger new releases and guarantee a level of returnability throughout the year. Oni Press has made all releases returnable for the foreseeable future and is reassessing its release schedule for the remainder of the year. For its part, Diamond Comic Distributors, has told retailers that those affected by shelter-in-place orders can place their account on hold, essentially shutting down business until further notice. Which is good. Northern California retailer Ryan Higgins of Sunnyvale's Comics Conspiracy noted his shop is luckier than most, thanks to its ability for customers to order and pay online via the Comic Hub point-of-sale system, but he fears even that won't help much in the long run. I'm more than happy to pay my bills, but I can't if I'm severely limited in my ability to sell to customers, Higgins told the Hollywood Reporter. The online store is great, but the vast majority of our business is walk-in customers. Even though I'm in regular contact with our subscribers, not being able to walk in will limit who buys comics from us. Shops looking for relief do have a few options. Last year, the Forge Fund was established to assist retailers in times of need. Additionally, independent publisher Mad Cave Studios launched a crowdfunding campaign Thursday to assist smaller retailers with the intent to raise at least $100,000 to be shared equally across all retailers asking for financial aid. As of the time of this writing, it's raised over $100,000. Despite the many challenges, though, many remain optimistic about what lies ahead for the industry and the medium as a whole. As Vault Comics CEO Damien Wassell put it, comics will find a way forward. We always have. Readers love the medium and always will. How the medium is sold to readers has changed many times in history, and the medium remains. The medium, sure, but what about the stores and the industry built up around it? Collector's Paradise will offer curbside pickup, shipping, and sales. Golden Apple will continue its car hop service and take phone orders. I'm more than a little concerned, one of the great guys in comics, Ryan Leibowitz, owner of LA's Golden Apple, told the Hollywood Reporter. It's just weird right now, but I have to keep moving. So yeah, anyway, look, I know that comic book retailers are probably not at the forefront of everyone's mind at this time, but they are, in fact, the epicenter of where many of us became imagination connoisseurs. In a way, a comic book store is like an ongoing salon that's open to you all the time if you want to go have intellectual discourse about any facet of comic book collecting, I mean, I have so many great memories of, heck, I met Michael Jackson at Golden Apple once. I have very fond memories of comic book stores, and they mean a lot to me. They meant a lot to John Schnepp, and I hope they don't go away, but it is an industry that already is in a state of flux and transition, so I really hope that, we can definitely see a way forward, and that all of the comic books retailers and comic book publishers, and especially Diamond Distribution, is helping out. And I think that they are. I mean, we'll see what happens, but it's something to be aware of. I like the idea of a car hop service. If you could call up Golden Apple, maybe prepay with your credit card. I don't know how they're going to do that, but you could go and somebody will literally just walk out. They do have an alleyway behind Golden Apple off La Brea, and you could have their car hop bring out your books, which is amazing. Now, there's a couple other things in the Hollywood Reporter. I mean, I would just say I won't read them, but go to the Hollywood Reporter today. There's a couple of articles that are really interesting. Disney raises $6 billion in a debt offering. Disney, $6 billion. And there's a great article about theater owners chief on Universal's Trolls on-demand play. Exhibitors will not forget this. Now, I'm not being paid by the Hollywood Reporter. It's just I go to the Hollywood Reporter and Variety and Deadline every day to find entertainment news stories. And there's a lot of interesting stuff about how I find the disruption going on fascinating to the industry and everything that's happening. It's happening so quickly. The new Issa Rae, Kumail Nanjiani movie was just picked up by Netflix. It was coming out, Netflix just bought it. I think it goes online in a week or something if it's not already there. Crazy stuff is happening. And I need not remind anybody, if there's anybody in the industry, anybody who's buying, Tango Shalom, I've got a feature film ready to go. We'll just have to adhere. I can adhere to whatever your delivery requirements are. It's for sale, up for purchase. And I think it's as I said, Tango Shalom is a Jewish spiritual quest, a Jewish spiritual quest family dance comedy fable, fun for the whole family. And who? I mean, don't you want to see a movie with that kind of? It's a new genre unto itself. So I think that's pretty amazing. But anyway, I'm going to jump in. I have so many letters that people have been sharing with me and sending me. So I figured, I think one of the great things about being part of the imagination connoisseur community here with you guys is that everybody's been sending me letters. And what better way than to celebrate than read your guys' letters, and girls, and non-binary, aliens, however you want to call it. However you identify, I don't care, because you are all welcome here. Everybody, I'm like the Zelda Rubinstein of the spirit world. Well, I'm the Zelda Rubinstein of YouTube. All are welcome. Welcome, children. Come into the light, which is Robservations, and I'll read your letters. So thank you for all doing that. I've got many letters to still burn through, and you guys are sending in chats and all that. So we might as well just, gosh, I'm gonna keep banging these out. Let's see what I've got here. This first one comes from Herman Mueller. And Herman Mueller says, it's funny. The more I read these letters, the more I want to get theatrical with them. But I won't. I don't want anyone to misconstrue that I'm somehow making fun of them, because I'm not. But, I just thought it might be fun. Anyway, this one comes from Herman Mueller. Hello, Rob and my fellow Robservers. I have to admit that I'm torn over Star Trek Picard. I feel like I'm watching a fan fiction variation of a mirror universe concept where the fans somehow convinced our beloved actors from Next Gen to come out and be involved, much the same way that the original cast came out for the fan film Star Trek of Gods and Men. Much like Of Gods and Men, I am loving seeing the cast again, but at least Of Gods and Men contained it to 90 minutes. This is hour after agonizing hour of a 2-hour plot being stretched into a 10-part story arc that reminds me of what Scotty once said. And at Warp 15, we're going nowhere fast. Star Trek Picard has too many undesirable elements that Next Gen had in Season 1. Whether it's the poor pacing of drawn-out plots like Encounter at Farpoint, a redo swipe like The Naked Now, the cringeworthiness of Code of Honor, or not developing a fearsome villain like the Ferengi in The Last Outpost, these episodes of Picard scream, we don't know what's going on. But where Gene Roddenberry had but Gene Roddenberry had a version and was trying to figure out how to capture lightning in a bottle a second time while he revisited concepts he hoped would turn out better the second time around, Picard has left me scratching my head asking, do I even care about these characters anymore? The answer, of course, is yes. And that's what hurts. I know I should get a life. I'm 55 years old. I've been watching the original series in reruns since 1972. I've watched every episode of every series untold numbers of times, but watching Picard just flat out hurts. I have to compare it to James Cawley's pilot for his fan film series, Come What May, in New Voyages. This fan-made film had heart and desire to be true, maybe too true, to Star Trek, with a weak plot, bad acting, and poor lighting, but all of this was forgivable because it was an attempt to be true to Star Trek. Picard has a weak plot that is incoherent, and while it has hints of honoring Next Gen, it only hints. Other than the Next Gen guest stars, the acting is par and subpar. I don't know what else to say. My only hope is that Mark Bernardin can get Picard back on track in Season 2. Well, Herman, I'm right there with you, son. I really am. I find it, Your assessment that the show is fan fiction, I think, is bang on the money. It really seems that way to me. It seems like, I hate to say it, but full disclosure, I submitted to the Next Generation twice. And the first time I submitted to Next Gen, both were rejected. I was trying to get an agent, and through a family member, I was hooked up with an agent, and I had written an outline, not a full script, but I'd written like a 20-page outline for an episode it was going to be for the second season. And I wrote it during the summer when I first moved to LA. So the second season of Next Generation had not debuted. And I want to say that the summer of '88, the writer's strike was going on. So I had written it during the writer's strike when I first moved down here. And I didn't know how to write. I'd never tried writing a script before. And, well, that's not true. I did write a screenplay in high school. But I had never written an outline for TV. And I basically was trying to prove that I was too cool for Star Trek school. So I wrote a sequel that had elements of like 5 episodes of the first season of Next Gen in them. And, it was a data story, and it was called Lost Data. And the plot, I'll give you the plot. Basically, there was a spacefaring cloud that we had seen previously in an episode of TNG. And this cloud was made up of a bunch of minds, like sentient minds. And my story was all about how they were appealing to Federation membership. That this non-corporeal, they had no planet, but they were a spacefaring race. And they were applying for Federation membership, but they didn't know how. They wanted to be in the Federation, but they didn't really know how. So Data was returning back from a conference in a shuttle, and they grabbed the shuttle. And what they did was they basically, Inner Light style, but this was before Inner Light, they basically gave Data an experience where he went to Turkana 4, which is where Tasha Yar grew up, and was a part of the life she led. He was put in charge of the group that she belonged to, how they were always escaping the rape gangs, and all this horror was visited upon her. And people were killed, and so Data experienced what she experienced on this failed Federation colony. And at the end, he learned a lesson, because this was how this non-corporeal, this race of energy beings was trying to explain to Data, show Data how much they understood about what Federation ideals were all about. And that by giving Data this experience. Now, perhaps that could have been a halfway decent story. So imagine if Inner Light was, instead of, and by the way, Inner Light wouldn't come until years after I wrote this story. But imagine if the Inner Light was actually, if there was a race of energy beings that made Picard experience the Inner Light to show they understood empathy and the underlying principles of the Federation by making Picard experience this race that had gone extinct, and giving Picard a taste of what was there. And it was the energy beings that had preserved the memory of this race instead of a probe. It was that kind of a story. It was that kind of idea. Yeah, I mean, and I have to say, maybe there was a kernel of an idea there, but it was so all over the place that I got notes back, very nice notes back from a top agent in Hollywood at the time, who knew my uncle and took the time to read this and wrote me about a page of notes explaining what was wrong with the story and how it was just too broad and it wasn't too specific enough. And I was like, damn it, you're not a Star Trek fan. You don't know. That's what my first response was. But I feel like this 10-episode season of Picard was kind of like that story I wrote. Not that I'm as good as those professional writers that are professional writers writing the Picard show, but I feel that it's that all over the place. I feel that we're given a bunch of ideas in every single episode, and those are really interesting, and you could spend all 10 episodes exploring that. The Borg cube alone. Hell, you could do an entire season about what would happen if they acquired a Borg cube. The whole idea of repatriating the Borg and how do they deal with their individuality. I mean, but that they've barely even touched on any of that. I mean, they're just like, here's all these Borg, let's kill them all. Let's just get rid of them all. What we really need is we need Seven of Nine as the Borg queen of this sector of space, so she can tear ass around the galaxy in her Borg cube, wrecking shop. And even that they got rid of. But anyway, I feel your pain, Herman. I feel your pain. I'm right there with you, buddy. And I don't disagree. Our boy King Waspinator is back. Good morning, Rob, a.k.a. the Rob Lobster seafood platter of YouTube entertainment punditry. Wow. The Rob Lobster. I'm Fred Schneider. The Rob Lobster seafood platter of YouTube entertainment punditry, and he who shall be named. It's your old pal, King Waspinator. I'm certain everyone is sick to their eye teeth of Picard ruminations. So, I thought I'd write in about two relevant franchises who have major roles that I think would be improved if their traditional ethnicity was changed. In other words, I'd like to talk about why I think we need an African-American Mad Max reboot and a Rwandan Magneto. Ooh, I'm interested in this. Mad Max 2, a.k.a. The Road Warrior, is generally what I will answer when asked what my favorite movie is. By the way, I have to tell you, King Waspinator, The Road Warrior, every time I watch it, I first saw it, of course, in the summer of 82. It took that long to come to America. Obviously, I saw Mad Max in a theater, but they felt that American audiences didn't know Mad Max, so they changed the name of Mad Max 2 in this country to The Road Warrior because the connection was tenuous at best, I thought. I mean, tell that to the Australians, man. But anyway, I love The Road Warrior, and it's very timeless, and the cinematography, George Miller's direction. The Road Warrior is a masterpiece. So I'm right there with you. Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior is generally what I will answer when asked what my favorite movie is, and as much as we all absolutely love Fury Road, we should probably accept the notion that George Miller is unlikely to make another one. I don't know. We'll see. I'd gladly be wrong here, but in lieu of such a reality, I think there's an opportunity to make a proper American remake of the original Mad Max film, but with a black Mad Max, who was a hero cop in Detroit in the days following the full collapse of society, largely lift the original's plot as is, but set it in apocalyptic Lower Michigan. Frankly, of all the Max films, it's the first one that could stand to be zazzed up a smidge, in my most humble of opinions. Really? I don't know, man. It's pretty zazzed up. Speaking of humble, let's talk Magneto. Several months ago, there had been a brief flurry of videos on YouTube talking about the concept of Black Neato, which fizzled because it was basically a fake news clickbait. But I saw merit to some of the arguments for such a change. A Holocaust surviving Magneto in the 2020s would either be extremely old, or they would have to run through the whole plot from the comics when Magneto was de-aged and re-raised by Mariah McTaggart. A bit overcomplicated for a 2-hour film, perhaps. Then it occurred to me, if Magneto was a Rwandan child during the genocide of the 90s, that would put him somewhere in his 30s by the time Disney reboots the X-Men and would give Magneto's backstory much of the same underlying motives. Plus, it could help to shed light on a dark chapter in history to an audience that may not be prone to watching headier films like Hotel Rwanda. Bonus points for being from a non-fictional African nation. I'm curious to hear what your take is on either of these ideas, and if you yourself have any movies that you can think of that a modernization that included a dramatic change in character origins would improve or elsewise make adaptation easier. We'll see you on the road, Bronze. And we remember the Knight Rider. The Knight Rider is actually from Mad Max, though. And so is the Toe Cutter. But anyway, that's really interesting. Now, first of all, let's talk about your second point. John Campea and I have talked a lot about this on the John Campea show. How do you redo Magneto now for the modern age? Because obviously Ian McKellen was playing a Magneto who was a survivor of the Holocaust. And it was there that he learned that Homo sapiens were never to be trusted, that they would never accept differences in people, and that eventually you would wind up, and he feared what would happen to the the Homo superior race, mutants. And we're like, how do you reinvent Magneto for the modern age? And there was always talk. I think the Rwandan genocide is, and that's of course when the Tutsi and the Hutu were warring tribes, and literally they were hacking each other apart. One of them was hacking the other with machetes. Well, they were both. It was tribal violence taken to the nth degree, which I think in a way is not a bad. It's not a bad idea, but what I don't know if it works metaphorically the same way that that the Holocaust works, only because what was really, not that, look, a black Magneto doesn't bother me at all. I think a black Magneto could be cool, especially when you talk about the fact that the ideological differences between Xavier and Eric Lensher was like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. So I have no problem with the race of Magneto, if Magneto was black. But the one thing that I find so apt about the Holocaust metaphor is that how the Holocaust, and not just the destruction of the Jews, which is they call the Holocaust, but we call the Holocaust, but there's also another 6 million or 5 million and change people that were also exterminated. Not just Jews, but gypsies, homosexuals. There was all kinds of people that were destroyed. What was so insidious about the Holocaust was you had basically a country in Germany that, even though they were beaten and demoralized because of World War I, they used industrialization and the height of human civilization, which was mechanization and technology, and they used it to exterminate human beings on a scale really never before seen. I know people are going to say, Russia says, hold my beer, so does Pol Pot. And all of those things are true, but I mean, I think that was the thing that was so, insidious about it all, was that it was supposedly, Western civilization, the height of Western civilization, where we're supposed to be better than everybody else. But, oh, hey, we had the most efficient way of killing people. And I think that was something to take into consideration, and on a mass scale. But I do think the Rwandan genocide, what happened there, that kind of tribalism is also pretty shocking. I don't know. Maybe that could work. I just wonder if somebody, it was maybe. I mean, I think I like that idea, though. I like the idea that it could be. I mean, you might be able to have somebody, even a indigenous person. An indigenous person from, whether it's a First Nations person, maybe an Australian Aboriginal, or somebody. There's all different kinds of ways you could go with that. I'm curious because I think that I think Kevin Feige and his team over at Marvel already know what they're going to do. They've figured it out already. Maybe they haven't, but I just believe that they have, because, look, they didn't just wait until the X-Men came over from Fox. They knew what they wanted to do. They figured, well, if we got Spider-Man, we're going to be able to get the X-Men. And they had a plan. They have a plan for the Fantastic Four. They have a plan. But, yeah, I think that'll be really interesting. But I think that's a really good way to go. And I have no problem if Magneto is no longer a white Jew, but a black man from wherever in the world. I think that could definitely work. Look, I would love to see Denzel Washington as Magneto, frankly, because I'll watch Denzel Washington do just about anything. And I think he brings kind of a gravitas to it, and I think I would love to see what he could do. I don't know if you'd ever get him to play Magneto, but maybe if the part was well written enough, I'd definitely like to see that. I think that'd be dope. And now what you're talking about a black Mad Max in America, bring that shit on, son. But, I don't necessarily know if it has to be maybe because you're talking about something that's close to that. I wonder how the one thing about Australia is, and I having lived in Australia for a year, there are vast swaths of Australia, that I believe could be desert after the collapse of society. I just don't know how there'd have to be a lot more civilization. Like the Road Warrior, there's not a whole lot of civilization going on. And I don't know if I would believe the milieu as much in an American remake, but I think you're right. I mean, a black cop, Detroit, Baltimore, wherever. I mean, a black cop being the new Mad Max, especially the people look, Michael B. Jordan. I'd love to see Michael B. Jordan as like a Mad Max character. But there's a lot of great actors that could play a role like that I bet would just kill it. Kill it. So King Waspinator, two very fine ideas from you today, and I thank you for those. Very thought-provoking. What do you guys have to say about that? Another letter, a short one from our man Stephen Goggin, who writes in a lot. Dear Rob and listeners, I hope everyone is doing well in these strange times. This is a short letter. I watched for the first time a film called 28 Days Later. Bravo! And let me tell you, son, 28 weeks later, the sequel does not disappoint. That is one heck of a duology. That's all I can say. I thought I had seen it before, but I realized I'd not done so. I maybe mixed it up with 30 Days of Night. But anyway, I really enjoyed 28 Days Later. It very much reminded me of the old 1970s BBC program created by Terry Nation called The Survivors. Terry Nation of Blake Seven fame as well as Doctor Who. 28 Days Later seemed to pay big homage to this excellent show. Some episodes of Survivors are on YouTube, and I enjoyed everyone in 28 Days Later. Brendan Gleeson and Cillian Murphy and Naomi Harris were all excellent. I also enjoyed seeing Empty London. Wow, how did they do it? It was enjoyable to watch. The film also reminded me of two other UK 70s sci-fi shows, both on YouTube to see for free, and they are the John Mills 1979 Quatermass in the Pit, a remake of the 1958 classic, which is also excellent to watch. Actually, Quatermass in the Pit is a remake of the 67 version of Quatermass in the Pit, or 20 Million Miles to Earth. That was Quatermass 2 you're thinking of. And Children of the Stone. If you want eerie, classic British sci-fi cult shows, I would recommend these shows. Well, Stephen, those are all great choices. I'm a huge Quatermass fan. And obviously, 28 Days Later, I thought was great. The great Danny Boyle, Academy Award winner Danny Boyle, directed 28 Days Later. And to ask, like, how did you do those? How did they get those desolate shots of London streets? Well, I heard they filmed. This is what I heard they did. Now, this might be apocryphal, but this is what I remember hearing. They were shooting with video. That movie was shot with video cameras, so they had small cameras all over the place. They shot in the morning to get those desolate shots, and they would literally, apparently had really hot girls. They would get really hot girls to stop traffic, and they were able to do it. Like, people stopped when the hot girls came out and said, no, we're shooting. Or something like that, and they would bang out these quick shots because they would get like 15 cameras or something and get as much footage as they could at once, and they're like, action, which I think is pretty amazing. Now, that might be apocryphal. Somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I remember hearing, and I'm a big fan, and I cannot recommend 28 Weeks Later enough. You'll really enjoy it. Rick Berg writes in and says, "It's me, Rick, about comments stated in Robservations 366. RISA, R-I-S-A, is for biological pleasure hunting, i.e. they go there because they want, but the Federation, even in the future, would prohibit building a race just to serve people with pleasure, I believe. That is what is called slavery. Isn't that why the Borg are hated? If you want perfect pleasure, it's called a holodeck. Just pay the Binars to write you a program." This is a short letter, and true Trekkers will only understand. As usual, with respect, Rick Berg, steady as she goes. Well, what Rick is talking about, we all know from the first season Next Generation episode that I adore, by the way. The first season of Next Generation is not completely the hot mess people would have you believe. And one of my favorite episodes from the first season of Next Generation is an episode called 11001001. And it is, of course, the Enterprise has pulled in to a space dock. By the way, beautiful matte paintings when it shows the gangplank going out to the Enterprise. And there's an alien race called the Binars that are souping up the Enterprise computers. And, of course, I don't want to ruin it for you, but the Binars also soup up the holodeck. And that is the first appearance of Minuet, a woman in the holodeck that actually entrances Riker. And it's worth watching. But, you're right. I mean, they really haven't dealt with one of the things that I really can't stand and I don't understand is, again, they refer to Bruce Maddox, a character that was only seen once in Next Generation in Picard. And the whole use of Bruce Maddox and his inclusion and why was he murdered? Like we needed to see Bruce Maddox carry this through. Again, there's so many ideas that are thrown. Anyway, so Bruce Maddox, played by actor Brian Brophy, in the episode Measure of a Man, wanted to take Data away and study him because he said, hey, if we could make more Datas, they could be on every starship. And Whoopi Goldberg steps in and goes, no, that sounds like you want to make a slave race. That's what she tells Picard. It's great. Love it. And there's again, all of these, they introduced this idea that Bruce Maddox, I mean, if you're going to create a race of super androids based on Data, why kill the creator of that before, well, okay, theories? Maybe he wasn't the creator of that android race. Maybe it was someone else who we've seen want to exterminate humanity and have his own. What if there's another robot, a messianic robot figure we've met before? You know what I'm saying? But I think that's an interesting letter, Rick. And thanks for writing in. This one comes from Eli Gray. Eli Gray says, I sent the super chat in on the John Campea show about Free Enterprise posters. Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting about that. I wanted to say thank you so much for sending us a Free Enterprise studio, a poster for our studio that we're launching. Well, I haven't yet. I know how rare those are. They're very rare. Are you sure we can't pay for it or anything? I'll send you the shipping cost. Sure. We are seriously very excited and appreciative. We definitely would help you out with a GoFundMe to get Free Enterprise out on 4K. You know, I've a lot of people have offered that, but I think it's too much money to crowdfund, to be honest. I mean, maybe there's a possibility that I really haven't reached out and made a phone call. I probably should about Free Enterprise in 4K, but even if you pre-sold, like if I were to pre-sell a special edition in a steelbook, like say Synapse did with Suspiria, and you sold 40,000 copies. If you sold 40,000 copies at $50, you would barely have enough money to cover the costs of putting the movie out on 4K and then manufacturing the discs and packaging them. And I wouldn't but I don't think Free Enterprise, you'd never sell 40,000 copies. So I'm dubious as to whether that would work. I mean, the way things are now, if you go by, as I know from my friend Lucas Kendall, the specialty market, and I don't have sales figures on what Arrow does or what Shout Factory does, but, you know, I have run the numbers. The problem is Free Enterprise is basically a forgotten movie, much to my chagrin. It's basically a forgotten film, and there's not a lot of people that know about it. And yes, the people that know about it love it. And what I would like to do is do a new version of it, a definitive version, a Final Frontier cut, and include all 3 cuts on the disc and as many special features as I could. As a matter of fact, I found this tape in a box that we've never used before. This is a tape. This is a high 8 tape of auditions. This tape has Eric McCormack's audition for Free Enterprise on it. So I found this tape. This tape is from 22 years ago. I don't know how well preserved it is, but this would definitely be a special feature on the disc. But I appreciate that, and I will send this to you. Our channel is going to be called Grade School, and my partner in crime, D, loves your behind-the-scenes TNG footage. Oh, well, if you like that, Roger Lay Jr., the man who hired me with his company Urban Archipelago, Roger's company, was the company that was contracted to make the Next Generation documentaries, and he brought me on, and he and I did those together. We did those and Enterprise, and he was the prime mover behind all the Enterprise documentaries, although I helped, and then I was doing mostly the Next Generation documentaries. And there's an Inglorious Trexperts show that just dropped where Roger is interviewed, so check that out. Our channel is going to be called Grade School, and my partner in crime, D, loves your behind-the-scenes TNG footage and agrees with you about all the new Trek shows and films. He also wanted me to tell you he loves Silk Stockings and was excited when I told him about Tango Shalom. Well, Silk Stockings was not the show that I worked on. Silk Stockings was a different show. I worked on Femme Fatales, and that was a Cinemax show that was produced by HBO and Cinemax. Here's my address. I will get back to you on this, and I'll try and get this out, because God knows I got nothing better to do. So, yeah, I like that. Thanks for that. Our man Sean Pullen. Man, Sean Pullen has been taking me to task. Sean Pullen just sends in P.S. P.S. To answer my own question, how do you think our hero Picard will get us out of this? Not with shock and awe, not with violence and power. If the writers understand Trek, if they understand the character of Jean-Luc Picard at all, it will be talking. Picard the speechmaker, Picard the gentle whisperer, appealing to hearts and minds, withering or aspirational, grandiose speech or quiet conversation, Picard will talk and stir his opponent to compassion and understanding. Some will bemoan a lack of spectacle, some will flame the finale as anticlimactic. All say, fuck it, that's Trek, that's Jean-Luc Picard. Oh, I guarantee you he's going to talk. The real question I have is, will he get Space Legolas back home? Because I want to know, why did he go get Space Legolas in the first place? I'm sure Space Legolas is asking himself that question. I mean, thank God he found himself another lost cause, because Jean-Luc Picard hasn't paid much attention to him since he went to that planet and got him. For what reason, I don't understand. But I guarantee you Picard's going to make a speech, and maybe it'll go a long way toward people going, see, this is really good. Not if you're Space Legolas. That's what I have to say. There's people sending in chats. So let me jump over there. Hang on. Let me just throw in the glasses. I know to read. Man, those glasses they're embarrassingly dirty. Let me just start again here. All right. So let me go to that, and let me go to the chat window, if I may. And let's see. People have been firing stuff in here. So let's see. Paul Gilmore sends in a tip and says, as a lifelong fan of Star Trek, I decided to give it a shot, and I started Picard. My experience went from, what, ugh, why, to complete and utter confusion. I don't know how you can watch this without literally pulling your hair out. Well, you know, as my contemporaries lose their hair as they get older, mine just gets gray, and I want to keep it, so I don't pull my hair out. That doesn't, I've had to pull a tablespoon away from my eyeball because I was going to scoop my eyeball out and eat it, but I haven't done that yet. Paul Gilmore goes on after another tip and says, I also think a TV show or film should answer the 4 W's. Where, what, why, and when. All they are doing with both Discovery and Picard is thinking up some cool shit that might look cool on the screen without any thought to at least 2 of the W's. Why and what. Look, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think that the narrative storytelling in both Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard is indeed, especially with the amount of money that they've had, some of the very worst science fiction storytelling we have ever seen on television. And I'm including shows like The Fantastic Journey and Otherworld amongst them. I think Manimal and Automan had more coherent plots. But that doesn't mean I don't tune in every week, hoping it'll get better. Paul Gilmore says, also, during my viewing of both Discovery and Picard, I kept thinking, what happened to Live Long and Prosper? Now it's live as long as you can till your head gets blown off for no real reason. My opinion, Star Trek died in 2009 when they made Star Trek for no Star Trek fans. Sad. Well, as people know who watch this channel, I haven't been a fan of Star Trek. They've been doing everything to try and change Star Trek into something else, which I find rather inexplicable, to be honest. I don't really know why they're doing that. It doesn't seem interesting to me. And I'll tell you, if they pulled back and tried to make Star Trek, make it for half the price. Cut down on the special effects and turn it. Star Trek is drama. It's thought-provoking, interesting, allegorical drama seen through the prism of a science fiction, fantasy, action, adventure lens. But it's drama. You should be able to tell a great Star Trek story in a room with two people, which is what they did in Deep Space Nine's penultimate first season episode, Duet, or a few more people in second season's Next Generation episode Measure of a Man. But what's really interesting about this show is they haven't even given us any decent action scenes. They've had a few fisticuffs here and there, but their space battles have been, there's been basically one. I mean, they literally just had a Romulan warbird show up from a TOS warbird piloted by somebody you don't know, you never meet, and then it gets destroyed. And I'm like, what narrative purpose did that serve? Oh, I understand. They had to introduce Seven of Nine as a Fenris Ranger. But was that the best way to... I don't understand why Seven of Nine and Hugh were not the administrators or the administrators of the artifact. This idea that they literally took Seven of Nine and made her into an action hero, that's kind of badass. But also, it could have been a lot more interesting if they wrote her in such a way, we're going to make her a Fenris Ranger, which is an amalgamation of about 100 other things other than Star Trek. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Charlie Jones sent in a tip and says, and by the way, I'm with you. I think Star Trek died in 2009. It died because they decided, the people in control of Star Trek, Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams, let's turn Star Trek into something else that we like better. That's what they did. And the people that have been controlling Star Trek since then have been following that mandate. And as much as I love Michael Chabon's work as a novelist, he has not proven to be a very effective screenwriter at all. And he did become the showrunner. And I know Spider-Man 2 and Nebulas and Hugos and all that, but I haven't seen a lot of evidence that he's the right fit for Star Trek. I mean, there was a lot of good writers that tried their hand at Star Trek and couldn't do it. They didn't get to keep doing it over and over again, but okay. Charlie Jones sends in a tip and says, "Good day, Mr. RMB and the Post-Geek Singularity. Hope everyone is well. With this quarantine happening, I've been finding myself watching many films. Yesterday, I saw The Goldfinch. After I finished, I couldn't believe the 24% Rotten Tomatoes score. I truly enjoyed this movie, and it's a great book. The book is great. As many people know, one of my most eagerly desired cinematic adaptations. I mean, I would say that I would want to do it, but frankly, if somebody came up to me and said, Rob, here's $100 million. Here's one of your favorite books, which is Donna Tartt's first novel, The Secret History. You can go write and direct this. I don't think I'd take that job. I would have to be able to hire somebody like Steve Zalian or Eric Roth to write the script with me. And I think The Goldfinch, unfortunately, what a wonderful novel. And I don't think the adaptation was what it should have been, which is a bummer. It is a bummer. But what can you do? Yeah. But I don't think it's as bad as 24. I think it's just maybe cloying. I don't know. I just don't think it captured the spirit of Donna Tartt's writing. I love her. If you guys want to read an amazing, transformative book that you'll never stop thinking about, read Donna Tartt's The Secret History. I have 2 first editions of it right over there, but you can't have them. Chairman Mao tipped $1 and says, I wonder how much WB are kicking themselves for delaying Wonder Woman 84. Wonder if the studios will now shy from scheduling too far out, delaying overly long, etc. If we're in this for 18 months, etc. 18 months, there could be periodic rolling quarantines to put out local outbreaks. That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. Look, nobody could have predicted this. Nobody could have predicted this. We're in uncharted territory. I don't even know. I mean, I think we're going to have epidemic protocols in place. And the fact of the matter is, the Trump administration did remove some of those things. The military has been gaming out, and they have flat out stated that one of the great national security threats we have is a pandemic, and that those were not heeded, as the Trump administration and Trump himself said. Look it up. It was back 2 years ago. They got rid of that pandemic response team thinking they didn't need it. And yeah, they did. The whole point of having something like a pandemic response team, the whole reason that we have a military is to be able to be prepared for any eventuality. And a pandemic response team is something that in this day and age, and here's what I find like strange. If you had a president that had read science fiction and fantasy and horror, that president would never have gotten rid of a pandemic response team, whether it was a zombie apocalypse, whether it was Captain Trips from The Stand, whether it was Earth Abides, whatever it was. You don't do that. In the modern age, I mean, how many more movies? Didn't you see Outbreak or Contagion? It's and we've already had outbreaks before, MERS and SARS, and the idea of getting rid of a pandemic response team was monumentally dumb. But I do think now we live in a world where things are changing rapidly, and we'll see where the government responds. I mean, they've been talking a good game. I've been watching the response. I saw Pence, and I saw the doc. I always get his name wrong. And President Trump today responding, and they're saying a lot of things, but again, they need to be more concrete. We need to see more. If you're gonna have a manufacturing act, well, what are you going to manufacture? Where are you going to manufacture it? How long is it going to take to manufacture these things? Again, I really maintain that I wish the United States government was run by a film crew. I really do. A film crew can solve any problem very quickly. They're great. So yes. Chairman Mao also says, well, hang on, you've added 3 things. I probably should read these all together. You say that there could be periodic rolling quarantines to put out local outbreaks. In the future, once testing and/or inoculation of coronaviruses becomes common, we may all have to carry proof of our recent shots or tests in order to work, travel, or gather. It will be as common as a driver's license, a violation of privacy, or necessary for public health and safety. For liability reasons, it may be impossible not to have to get carded in the future. Just like having to pass a drug test, you may have to pass a coronavirus test. Oh, I think something is coming down the pike that's going to be very similar to that. The real problem is, the problem comes down to, and this is why the thinking, when you have a for-profit healthcare industry, there is no incentive to help people that are in higher risk. Like if you're higher risk for a certain disease, or maybe you've got that genetic marker that says you're at risk for breast cancer, the more that we know. I mean, on one hand, the more that we know about human physiology, the better off we're all going to be. The more we know about these viruses, we're better off. But yeah, that more information, it's a slippery slope. And we're going to be like, well, you can't get tested, or you have this disease, or you have a predilection for this, or whatever. I don't know what it is, but where does personal liberty begin and end, and where does the good of the public begin and end? And I think you're right. Look, we have to get tested for these viruses, and curtailing people's travel might be a good way to do it. But how do you live in a free society if that's the case? And when you have a for-profit, I mean, sure, they're collecting, as you send your DNA information out to 23andMe or Ancestry or whatever, what you're doing is you're giving away your genetic information, and suddenly one day it's going to come bite you in the ass when you try and get healthcare, and they're like, well, you have genetic dispositions for these diseases, so you can't get covered for them. I mean, it is a very slippery slope. So it's a good point. Good point. Willow sends in a tip that says, you said that you watched Thief with your grandfather and froze during an expletive-laden scene. Oh, yes. What is the most awkward movie watching experience that you've had with someone? Well, I can tell you, I've talked about that on the show, and in honor of our previous letter about the Road Warrior, it was when I went and saw the Road Warrior when my high school, when I went to high school, it was a 3-year high school, and it became a 4-year high school when I moved up as a 9th grader. So I became a sophomore, and then our first freshman class at Mercer Island High School in Mercer Island, Washington. It was our first freshman class. We had 2 middle schools that went into the high school. We had Mercer Island, we had South Mercer Junior High and North Mercer Junior High, and they fed into, and junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. We fed into a 3-year high school, but that year it became a 4-year high school. So in addition to the 9th graders, of which I was one, the 8th graders came up as well. So I became a sophomore while the 8th grade class became freshmen. But we had 2 junior high schools merging, so there was a bunch of new people that I didn't know. And there was a girl named Julie Williams who was in my class. And it was right after, it was like the first week of school or something. And I didn't really know Julie Williams that well. She was in a class of mine or something. And she was cute blonde, and she asked me basically asked me out. And we were going to see the Road Warrior. And the way I remember it is, her older sister and her older sister's boyfriend were taking us out, and we were double dating. And I figured we went to the Guild 45th Theater on 45th in the U District, the University District, right up the street from Dick's Drive-In. And she wanted to sit behind her sister and her boyfriend, and I was kind of clueless. I'm like, well, why don't we just sit in the same row? Like, it was the Road Warrior, and I'm seeing it again in the theater. And during the course of the movie, she kept trying to make out with me. And I didn't make out in movie theaters. I mean, movie theaters were sacred, hallowed ground for me. And she kept trying, and I'm like, listen, you gotta watch this movie. And she hadn't seen the movie. I'm like, how can you not watch The Road Warrior? I'm like, this is one of the most kick-ass movies, and I'd seen it like 4 times at that point. But I'm like, one, to be honest, I just met Julie, and I want to see The Road Warrior again. I don't know what that said for me. I mean, I had already been relatively physically active with the ladies by this point in my life. So I'm like, which I love, but I'm like, hey, can we watch The Road Warrior? So that was probably the most awkward experience that I had. And then there was another guy, I won't use his name, but there was another guy, I think I've used his name before, but there was another guy that on Monday, this was like on a Friday, but then the following Monday, a guy comes up to me and he says to me, he asked me, takes me aside, and he was another guy that I didn't know who was from the junior high school, and he says, hey, I hear you're gay. And I was like, I had gay friends at this point in my life. I mean, was I 16 or something? 15, 16? I still had gay friends, and it didn't bother me. And I said no, but I could tell that here was somebody who hadn't quite come out yet, but I'm sure in his future he was going to. It was obvious to me. And I told him, no, I'm not gay. Why would you think I was gay? Because, we're all new, so it's like now the second week of school, and he says to me, because Julie Williams says you're gay. And I'm like, what? What? And it was very funny. I go, why would she say that? Well, apparently you went to a movie and you wouldn't make out with her. I'm like, we were at the Road Warrior. And it was very funny. He goes, wait, you were seeing the Road Warrior? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, oh, you mean you just want to watch the movie and not make out with her? And I go, yeah. And he goes, I totally get it. You're not gay. And I thought that was pretty funny. Yes. Mukbang Reviews sends in a super chat and says, today's Prince album is Chaos and Disorder, an album I must admit I don't know as well as other Prince albums. The song is I Rock, Therefore I Am. In other news, I can't sing that song. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't sing it. I finally saw and enjoyed Invisible Man. I feel like I'm fiddling as Rome burns. The question is, Mukbang, did you see Invisible Man? Because you can now get it on VOD. As we all know, Invisible Man and Emma and The Hunt are currently now you can get them now at home. You can stream them at home. Did you do that? I'm curious. Jason S. sends in a tip and he says, Rob, I know you don't like this movie. I do, except for the surfer scene. But considering the current situation and lockdown in LA, your next movie to watch and discuss on Whining About Movies should be John Carpenter's Escape from LA. Can you survive? Here's the thing. John Carpenter is one of my favorite directors. His use of widescreen composition, even all the way back to Assault on Precinct 13. I mean, I loved John Carpenter. And it was that time he was one of my first loves, first home video. The first 5 video cassettes I owned, 2 of them were John Carpenter movies. One was Halloween and one was Dark Star. And I was a huge John Carpenter fan. I mean, I still am. And I love so much of his output. And I was so looking forward to Escape from LA. And it was crushing disappointment to me. And I think one of the reasons is Escape from New York has some really great, for low-budget science fiction films, some tremendous verisimilitude. They famously went to St. Louis and filmed the burnt out parts of New York there. They were on Liberty Island for a brief moment. There's so much clever film work that went into making Escape from New York. When I saw Escape from LA, and I know it was not a cheap movie to make, but the CG, just all of it, it was so. It wasn't the kind of fall from grace that we saw from Dario Argento, but I felt it just was really. I would never have used all the CG work. You know, there's no CG in Escape from New York. You might think there is when you see the glider, the Gullfire. You flew the Gullfire in over Leningrad. I say Gullfire. I don't know if it was a Gullfire like over Leningrad, but the glider, and when you see the readouts, all of that was done with models and like chart pack tape or whatever. It was so cleverly done. And Escape from LA, they just didn't have the CG is really unconvincing. And it was crushing to me, and I couldn't get past it. None of it feels, it just doesn't. It feels like a low budget knockoff of Escape from LA, even though it costs 10 times as much, and it's just bone crushing. I don't know if I could show it to her. I don't know if she would dig it, but it's not a bad idea. Do It for Cash sends in a tip and says, Rob, great minds think alike. Thank you for highlighting the article that references Plato's allegory of the cave. Well, that was a letter sent in to me, but yes, I love that allegory of the cave. I read that yesterday. I've been wanting to write to you about that specific work of his and the exact topics the article addressed. Great find. Well, that was a letter. Hassan, was it Hassan who sent to me? Or Khalid sent that to me. I thought that was great on yesterday's show. I thought Plato's allegory of the cave, which I was unfamiliar with till I read that article, which is why I love this community for sending me that kind of stuff. I thank you for that. Great stuff. But yes, I love that allegory of the cave, and not knowing it, it was very cool. It was very cool. Let me go back and read a few letters, and then I will jump back into this. Wow. This comes from Web Monster Rets number W. I don't know what that is, but I'm sent a link. Peace, courage, and hygiene from the Web Monster. And they just send me a link. And you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say I cannot, in fact, tell you whether or not this link is legit or whether it's good. I can't tell you whether it's good or bad, I guess. That's what I want to say. But I'm going to put it in the live chat anyway. Here it is. Here's the link. So anybody in the live chat, please check this out and get back to me. But I want to thank you for writing in with the link. I hope what you just sent me is good. But hey, why not? If you took the time to make something and send it to me, I hope that it's not bad. Johnny Millennium. Oh, you know what? Johnny Millennium sent me a video about Buckaroo Banzai. and I'm going to have to. You know what, Johnny Millennium? I'll play this tomorrow on my show. I didn't see this until just now. I didn't download it. He was going to send it to me last night, and I promise I will play it tomorrow. I have to process it before I can play it on the show. So I will do that for you. This next letter comes from Charlie Jones. Hello, everyone. Been tuning into the show for a little over a year now. Left some YouTube comments and have turned into a few live streams. Like I'm sure many other imagination connoisseurs, I tend to watch the show at night when I'm winding down and just truly looking forward to all the letters as well as a daily topic, which tends to always be intriguing when Robert Meyer Burnett is discussing. Today, I've decided to write my first letter after listening to so many. Well, thank you for that. I would like to discuss what's currently going on in society with all of us being on lockdown and no one really knows what's next. I had planned on seeing films like Onward, The Way Back, The Hunt, and Bloodshot these past couple of weeks, but perhaps been in my own head and decided to skip the theater before all this blows over. I'm sure many people have felt this way as well because we didn't want to get sick, and we didn't want to get others sick. The feeling we all have is uncertainty. No one knows what's next. We see some good news from other countries, but then you read about Italy, and perhaps, like me, your jaw drops. I would like to thank you, RMB, and everyone here in the Post-Geek Singularity. I want to thank you for being consistent. We all have something to look forward to and get our minds off everything going on. Hearing other stories as well as whining about movies, we have something that can make us happy and dive into conversation about films and the things we love. Being in a quarantine and just laying low at the house for playing it safe, I've been watching movies that I've missed out on one way or the other, whether it was made before I was born or something about the movie just passed me by. Wes Anderson's The Grand Budapest Hotel happened to be one of those movies. Holy crap, I can't believe I've waited this long. That was right up my alley. Hope everyone stays safe and has a wonderful day. It's a confusing couple of months, but we all have each other and the love of film. Take care, Post-Geek Singularity and RMB. Charlie Jones. Charlie, what a delightful letter. First of all, thank you. And that's nice to know. I mean, one of the reasons that I do these chats is because of the community that we have here. And I very much appreciate you giving a shout out to Whining About Movies with Elizabeth. You know, I dragged her into doing the show, and she does get nervous about it, and she wonders how she will be received. I think she's been received quite well. I really enjoy showing her movies. I don't know, by the way, yet what our movie is going to be for Monday, but I will know by tomorrow, so I can tell the Richard, and there can be a watch party. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. It's always nice to hear that we're connecting. You know, it's strange. In less than a month, it's going to be my 5-year anniversary on YouTube. And I can't believe it was 5 years ago, but 5 years ago, the late great John Schnepp, who I miss every day, and John Campea had me on Collider Heroes. They did. And John is no longer with us. Rest in peace. But I think about him every day. And I'm still doing a show with John Campea even after all this time, and now doing this show. And I can't thank everybody enough and the viewers that seem to connect. I mean, what I like about this community is everybody's pretty active. Like when you're a part of this community, eventually somebody writes a letter, people go to the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page, they'll tweet with me or DM me, and obviously half the time you guys in the live chat, you're not even paying attention to what I'm saying. You guys are just talking to each other, which I think is great. You know, I mean, I understand after 368 of these episodes, why do you need to listen to me anymore? You don't need to listen to my review of the 10th episode of Picard. You know what I'm going to say. Although, hey, maybe I'll surprise you. One never knows. But I do want to thank you, Charlie, for a lovely letter. And I'm glad that you're still enjoying your time here. I think that's really great. This one comes from James Kevins. Greetings, Rob. In recent Robcasts, I've heard you go off the subject of believability in Star Trek Picard, especially in Episode 9 with the energy-draining Space Orchid planetary defense systems. Several letter writers have pointed out comparisons of giant space amoebas with the giant space orchids. Now, as I've heard you say on many occasions, it's good to like things, and if you find something to love in Picard, that's great. Go ahead and love it. But great storytelling should sweep the viewer away to a magic place. Sloppy or lazy storytelling, on the other hand, sweeps you up and then drops you flat on your ass when the illusion is shattered. Let me offer an example of both kinds of storytelling. Ooh, I love this. In 1993, NBC aired a show called Sequest DSV with Roy Scheider. It was produced by Steven Spielberg and starred Roy Scheider and Stephanie Beacham. It was set in the near future and combined high drama with realistic science fiction as humanity responds to economic and ecological pressures by colonizing the oceans. It was great. I think it's still available on many streaming sites. Season 1 was wonderful. Unfortunately, it ran at the same time that Star Trek The Next Generation exploded in syndication. The executives at NBC decided they knew better than the writing staff, so in the second season they science fictioned up the stories and replaced most of the cast with barely disguised next-gen characters. One of the worst was the new telepathic, empathic doctor. It got so bad that Roy Scheider started bad-mouthing his own show. I really tried to give it a chance, but they did an episode where a group of diplomats was kidnapped, and the doctor was trying to track them with her telepathy, but she lost them. She said they must have put them in a lead-lined room. Let me state that again. A lead-lined room. After I stopped laughing, I asked if I was expected to believe that her telepathy operated just like Superman's X-ray vision. I turned the TV off and never watched the show again. On the Inside Star Trek album, an interview with the great Isaac Asimov offered this advice. Great science fiction, to hold the audience attention, should have its basis in science. When Star Trek was at its best, it extrapolated what could be from what is. There are some shows where the writers don't know the science and they don't care enough to do the research, and it shows. Rob, you're right. I can buy a giant space amoeba. Giant space orchids? Remember, it's not just giant space orchids, it's a giant space orchid planetary defense system. Not so much. I wanted to love this show. It's Patrick Stewart, for God's sake. But I know how good this show could have been, and it embarrasses me to see what it's turned into. Thanks for listening, Jim Kevins. Well, Jim, first of all, great letter. Really like that letter a lot. Great. I love that you use an example of a show. I watched the first couple episodes of Sequest DSV. You know, I wanted it to be like, look, I grew up on Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. The idea, it struck me. The problem that I had with it, there's just nothing really going on. I mean, there's amazing life and all that, but when you're trying to tell stories about the Earth's oceans the way they exist now, I mean, even Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea ended up having aliens in it, you know, and but it was a handsomely mounted show, really well produced. I love seeing Roy Scheider in it, but yeah, I guess one of the things that I have been most disappointed in about Star Trek Picard, one of our letter writers pointed it out earlier, is that it feels like fan fiction. They haven't told, there's nothing going on in Picard that we haven't seen in other Star Trek episodes. And what I was really looking forward to was seeing a story about Picard. It seems now that we have the character that Patrick Stewart is playing does not feel or act like Jean-Luc Picard from the show. And I understand the answer would be, well, you know, he's not the same. But what Patrick Stewart wanted to do is, I get it. Let's make it more like Logan. Let's make it more like this, or let's make it more like that. The problem that I have is that he didn't say, let's make it like Star Trek. And I was really curious, what would a person like Picard in the Star Trek universe be like in the twilight of his life? You know, he's still, and he's gone off on an adventure that is seen. It's a pastiche of a million different Star Trek tropes we've seen before. And ultimately, we're going to wind up with more. Really, what we're seeing is a replay of Descent, Part 1 and 2, the end of the 6th season and the beginning of the 7th season of Star Trek. They haven't even dealt at all with, other than having synths are bad, we have to ban them because they revolted. But they really didn't revolt. They were hacked by the Romulans, the Zhat Vash, and so even that aspect of it, I mean, it would be really interesting to have seen in this series that take away all the uprising and all that, but what if a fundamental change had happened in Federation society where suddenly the Federation deemed it okay, and they did do this, that you could create synthetic life en masse to be used as slave labor and all of the ramifications of that. That could have been an interesting show, and it could have brought, I mean, it would have all of it, it would have been The Measure of a Man, but taken out to the 10 episodes of dealing with the moral and ethical ramifications across all of Federation society. And dealt with, like, for instance, now we have the Zhat Vash, which is a subset of the Tal Shiar. It's a separate organization within an organization. But, you know, I read Harv Bennett's original treatment for Star Trek 3, and it was called Return to Genesis. And one of the great aspects of that treatment, and that's one of the reasons, I guess, that I found Star Trek 3 so disappointing, is that Harv Bennett himself wrote this treatment that was far more compelling than the final Star Trek 3. But one of the things that was going on is that the Vulcans were appalled at the revelation of the Genesis device. They were so appalled that they wanted to secede from the Federation, that this kind of research had gone on, and they were terrified of what the ramifications of it were. And it would have been really interesting to explore what happens, you know, as you get older, when the society that you've grown up in, lived in, defended, changes around you. And the ideals, and that's what's happening in our society now. We're in a constant state of flux, and what people believe and what people want. I know that they're like, well, how compelling could you have made that story? Well, I'll tell you, you could have made it really compelling. You could have had 10 episodes if each episode was like Measure of a Man. You could have thrown in some action adventure in that too, but you could have made a really, really interesting, morally and ethically compelling and story-wise, plot-wise, compelling ethical, moral, societal journey, and really hit those issues head on. And at the same time, does someone who's been a member of society and who's done his bit, are they still relevant? Can you, as an elderly member of a society, still utilize any kind of leverage and power in that society? There's so many interesting ideas that could have been explored. And there's a lot of, look, I'll flat out admit it, there's a lot of really compelling and interesting ideas that they have introduced in Picard, but none of them have they developed. And they've just breezed by all of this stuff for what is ultimately, it comes down to its Descent Part 1 and 2. And I find it all disappointing. I think that's what's most disappointing is, like, there are people that like this story, and I understand there's people that are experiencing Star Trek for the first time, but the story that they've chosen to tell is a pastiche of all this stuff that we've seen before. And I don't know what this writer's obsession is. Why is Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard talking about AI and synths? I mean, look, the most interesting things that we've seen about AI, I mean, Ex Machina could be looked at as something about human beings treat AI horribly. AI revolts and destroys us. Whether it's Westworld, whether it's Ex Machina, but I think the greatest look at where AI could eventually take us is in the movie Her. You know, to me, if you're going to do a Star Trek show and you want to rip off anything, rip off Her. You know, what would have happened to Federation society if you create I mean, the idea of AI, artificial intelligence, and putting them in human form is so limiting in terms of where we would be at. AI is going to be, if there's AI in the 24th century, it will be so advanced. We would be dealing with things that are so beyond our understanding even now, that making robots that want to be human, androids that want to be human. It's already the most cliched concept in science fiction. It's been done to death. And I would love to have seen a really thoughtful, really interesting, read Ray Kurzweil's book, The Singularity is Near. And what would happen? We talked the Post-Geek Singularity. Well, when AI achieves sentience or however long it takes, what does that mean with that kind of computational power? I think what would happen is you would see that AI would be able to understand the universe in a much different way than we do, unfettered by bodies. I mean, it's such a strange thing that AI is limited. Synths and AI is limited to anthropomorphized versions of human beings or humanoids, when I think that there's so many more interesting directions to take it in. And I think that's what's most disappointing to me about Picard is just how dumb it all really is compared to so much of the great science fiction that is on some of these shelves I have behind me. And it's really unfortunate that what we've seen is a pastiche and amalgamation of things that have already been done on Star Trek. And I find that to be the most disappointing, because I wanted to love this. And the funny thing is, there's no comparing and contrasting about Picard as I wanted this to be a character study of where Jean-Luc Picard is in his life. And they've done everything but do that. They sort of showed us, okay, they've given us, he's basically become an old man rather than old Captain Picard. And they've just made it like, to show how bad it is, everybody yells at him and everybody, it's like, what the hell, man? There's no way that would occur. But I can't, I'll go on and on and on and on. This one comes from Omar94. Hi, Rob. All hail the imagination connoisseur king. Do you think Marvel and DC characters will have a definitive end in the comics, in all that the comic series will have series finales and no longer publish them as characters' journeys are completed? I ask because I was thinking about Alan Moore's Twilight of the Superheroes, a story Moore did not get a chance to write, where he would have given the DC characters a definitive end, which he felt they lacked due to comics having a floating timeline. While Kingdom Come did something similar, I wish Moore would have told the story he wanted, as it would have been interesting. The only time I can think where a comic series and character had a definitive end was in James Robinson's Starman. Thanks. Live long and prosper. Man, I love James Robinson's Starman. I have many volumes of it right over there. I think I would love to have seen that, Omar. I would love to have seen... I mean, look, these characters are never going to go away. You can always tell more stories with these characters. Do I think that comic books are going to go away? Perhaps. I mean, it's a medium that people really, really love, but as we evolve, comic books may take a different form. I like the idea of releasing graphic novel albums, things like Humanoids Press does, or getting, as you can see, that I love my graphic novels, but yeah, interesting. I don't know, but I'd love to see that Alan Moore story, man. I love Alan Moore. I just don't know if he would ever do that. He's not exactly on the best terms with, of course, DC. This one comes from Max Stare. I hope this letter finds you well. Like you, I love hearing people talk about the films and shows they find compelling. It's one of the reasons I love your show so much, and while I disagree with you on certain subjects, I find your exuberance toward films to be intoxicating, and I never miss an episode. Well, thanks, man. In the spirit of this exuberance, I'd like to share one of my favorite films of all time. The 1981 Hong Kong classic, The Prodigal Son, from writer-director and straight-up legend, Sammo Hung. Before I get into why I love this film, I'd like to talk a little about the kung fu genre itself. By the way, I love letters like this. I have not seen Prodigal Son, just so you know. I'm a huge fan of pretty much any genre you can think of. Superheroes, sci-fi, fantasy, westerns, Star Trek, among others. I love them all, and I enjoy them in their various media formats. However, I almost never hear any genre enthusiasts bring up kung fu. To be frank, this makes me sad. Sure, kung fu flicks don't always have the best plots or acting, and the campy dubbing often makes them difficult for people to take seriously. But if you can look past that, there is so much there to love. Like genres I mentioned previously, the kung fu genre has a rich history spanning over multiple decades and is brimming with fantastic and action-packed films. It's a world of honor and revenge, filled with masculine heroes and deadly feminine heroines. It's the home of the Fist of the White Lotus clan, Sam Steed the Drunken Master, the Five Deadly Venoms, the magical Zoo Mountain, Thunderfoot of the Devil's Shadowless Hand style, and the infamous Wu-Tang Clan. Looking for a thoughtful and beautifully shot film? Try Come Drink With Me from 1966. Looking for something with insane training sequences? Try 8-Diagram Pole Fighter, starring Gordon Liu, or the classic 1978 Jackie Chan film Drunken Master, which I've seen, I love, directed and choreographed by the legendary Yen Wo Ping. Wondering who would win in a fight, a kung fu master or a samurai? Try Shaolin vs. Ninja. How about a horror comedy? Well, it's got that too. Try Spooky Encounters, another Sammo Hung classic. How about a badass female fighter? You can't go wrong with Wing Chun starring the great Michelle Yeoh. The kung fu genre has it all. One of the things I love most about this genre is its raw creativity. These weren't big-budget films, even those produced by the Shaw Brothers or Golden Harvest, the two main kung fu production companies of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. They were usually made on shoestring budgets and were written, shot, and edited in a month or less. Because of this, they had to get creative with everything, from cinematography to locations. Where they really shine is in the fight choreography. The aesthetic and intricate fight scenes in those films were often choreographed on the spot, or at most a few days before shooting. Like modern films, kung fu directors approach the fight scenes dead on and without the use of shaky cam, allowing the choreography to speak for itself. These films are often made with minimal crews, with one person assuming positions that today would be filled by teams of people. For example, on several films, Jackie Chan took on the roles of lead actor, director, producer, writer, fight choreographer, and music composer-performer. See the 1980 film The Young Master. I first became interested in kung fu back in 1995. I was 8 years old and I went to see Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx. It completely blew me away, and I still love it as an adult, even though it's goofier than I remembered. This led me down the rabbit hole of kung fu, and I spent my teen years ravenously collecting and consuming every kung fu film I could get my hands on. This brings me to The Prodigal Son. I first saw this when I was 18, 10 years into my kung fu journey, and after I'd already seen much of what the genre had to offer. To me, The Prodigal Son is the pinnacle of kung fu action comedy films produced by the Shaw Brothers and Golden Harvest in the 70s. If I could make a small critique of the genre, it's that the plots are often paper-thin and usually consist of a basic revenge story. This format goes as follows. Untrained guy gets beat up by bad guy. Untrained guy goes to master to get training. Master gets killed by bad guy. And finally, hero takes revenge on bad guy. That sums up the plot to about 75% of all the classic kung fu movies. What first struck me about The Prodigal Son was that it didn't follow this formula exactly. It's technically still a revenge story, but in a much more clever way. And revenge is not central to the plot. I don't want to spoil the fun for anyone who hasn't seen it, so let me give you a rundown of some of the main characters. Lung Chang, played by Yen Bao. He's a good-hearted rich kid. I'm sure Willow's going, oh my God. He's a good-hearted rich kid who naively thinks he's a kung fu master. He frequently gets into fights, typically for honorable reasons, and always wins easily. In reality, his father has been paying off his trainers and the people he fights to protect his son, a fact that Lung Chang is unaware of. Yi Tai, played by Lam Ching Ying, he's a cross-dressing eunuch with tuberculosis who is a Wing Chun master. His tours with the Chinese opera troupe playing female characters and reluctantly takes on Lung Chang as a student. It's strongly implied that he's not a ladies' man, if you catch my drift. Nagai Fei, played by Frankie Chan, is a young noble lord who travels the country seeking to challenge himself against other fighters. He's accompanied by his 2 henchmen who, unbeknownst to Fei, are paid to ensure that no harm comes to him and are authorized to commit murder if necessary. This mirrors Chang's situation, but unlike Chang, Fei is a legitimate kung fu master. Sammo Hung plays Wabo, Yi Tai Fat's loudmouthed and buffoonish brother, who is also a Wing Chun master and who frequently gets into juvenile fights with his normally stoic brother. Wait a minute. I can't read the whole plot. People have to see this. It sounds great. The plot is simple but clever, and there are many genuinely funny and seriously non-PC moments. Yen Bao and Sammo Hung have great chemistry, which stems from the fact that they attended the same opera school in real life as kids, along with Jackie Chan, Yang Wu Ping, and Corey Yen, among others. It's beautifully shot as well. Classic kung fu movies tend to be filmed in a standard 2-camera fashion. In this sense, The Prodigal Son is not standard at all. The cinematography and locations are fantastic, and Sammo is extremely creative with his utilization of space. There are numerous wide-angle shots that are simply stunning. Couple this with some excellent lighting, and this movie is wonderful to look at. On top of that, you have ninjas, training sequences, campy gore, Chinese opera scenes, a fight with a giant flaming flag. What? And a final battle in an ancient Chinese ruin. This movie sounds rad. There are also some great dining scenes in restaurants, an element which is a staple of kung fu films. Come on, Rob. How badass does this movie sound? It sounds pretty badass. Can I get it on Blu-ray? Since we're all in quarantine, there's no better time than to check this film out if you haven't already. It's firmly planted in your wheelhouse. The last time I looked, it was streaming on Amazon Prime. They only have the English dub, but kung fu films like spaghetti westerns are shot without sound, so it's dubbed no matter what language you watch it in. Besides, I'm of a mind that 70s and 80s kung fu should be watched with the English dub anyways. It's goofy and fun in the most fantastic way, and it's got some of the most quotable dialogue ever. If you're reading this letter, I'd like to end by saying I'm indebted to you for hours of quality entertainment. Keep doing what you're doing and stay safe out there. All the best. Max Stare. Well, Max, let me tell you, dude, no one's written at all to me about kung fu movies. This is a first, and what a great letter this is. The Prodigal Son, 1981. Sammo Hung. I'm on that, as John Schnepp would say. Get on that, son. Yes, I will do that. That sounds fantastic to me. What a lovely letter. Thanks for that, man. That was a good letter. I do enjoy that. Let's see. Omar, 94, wrote something else quick. I'll read it. Hey, Imagination Connoisseur King, since none of us really know what is happening with the new Star Wars movies, do you think Disney should go back and reboot John Carter in its place? I remember reading when Disney bought the rights for John Carter in the 1980s, the intention was for that to be the new Star Wars. Considering Favreau's relationship with Disney, I think he could make it if Disney decides to give John Carter another shot. Favreau actually almost made it before doing Iron Man, so maybe he can have his chance to get back into it. What do you think? Would you like to see John Carter and the world and people of Barsoom on the big screen again? Thanks, live long and prosper. Well, as many people know, I am a big fan of Andrew Stanton's John Carter, and I honestly believe, I've said this before, I have a theory about this movie. John Carter, the movie is called John Carter, and it's based on a book called A Princess of Mars, and it's an actual Disney movie. Andrew Stanton, the director, was making his live-action feature debut after directing, Finding Nemo and WALL-E. So it's not like he wasn't a valued member of the Disney community who had created 2 very beloved films that made a lot of money for Disney. And so here he is making his first foray into live-action directing with John Carter. Now, based on a book, A Princess of Mars. Now, I understand, A Princess of Mars. Edgar Rice Burroughs' books are all about Barsoom, which is Mars. And there was a Marvel Comics version of this in the 70s called John Carter, Warlord of Mars. John Carter, Warlord of Mars. I believe that this movie was moving along. It was one of the most expensive movies. It still might be the most, well, no, you got Infinity War now, but It was one of the most expensive movies Disney ever made. John Carter of Mars has a very famous character, Woola, basically a space dog that goes really fast. It has the Tharks. It has incredible alien creatures. You've got one of the great princesses that could have been one of the great Disney princesses, Dejah Thoris. And when I was growing up, A Princess of Mars had a very famous Frank Frazetta cover that was very evocative of what the Star Wars paintings, the one sheet, that the Tom Jung painting that became the first Star Wars one sheet, the release one sheet, was very reminiscent of Frank Frazetta's art. This artwork of Dejah Thoris and these lizard creatures, you saw it all the time. When I was a kid, I saw that every drugstore that had a paperback spindle rack. This book, these Edgar Rice Burroughs books were very famous, and of course Disney had already struck gold with Tarzan. Well, maybe not as much gold as they want, but so this was going to be the beginning of a series of movies. They were going all in. Disney was spending money. They were going all in. And I'll tell you what I believe happened to John Carter, a movie that I really like. I really like John Carter of Mars. I really like the movie. And I think, here's what happened. This is a theory. This is my own theory, and people think I'm full of it. But I have some evidence to present that I think is damning at the end. My theory is this. They're spending $250 million on John Carter. They're going to launch their own science fiction franchise. What did the Barsoom novels inspire? Star Wars. They were huge inspirations for Star Wars. George Lucas, not just Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, but of course the serials, the Flash Gordon serials, but also the Barsoom novels, the John Carter novels, were very much an inspiration to George Lucas. Well, at some point, our man Bob Iger catches wind, whatever happens, that George Lucas is interested in the unthinkable, selling Star Wars. And when John Carter, when Bob Iger found this out, they were deep into production of John Carter. Deep into production of John Carter. Now, I believe the movie was made under the title John Carter of Mars. John Carter of Mars. And they even had a logo, like one of those. John Hughes always had logos for his titles, like these little acronym logos. And they're like a G, C, M. They had all that. So Bob Iger heard that George Lucas was going to sell Star Wars. Now, obviously, 20th Century Fox had released all of the Star Wars movies. I mean, beginning with Empire, George Lucas owned them, but Fox still released them. But then again, George Lucas had a long-standing relationship with Disney, Captain EO, Star Tours, the Indiana Jones ride. So Bob Iger is like, no one is going to acquire Star Wars but me. Disney will acquire Star Wars. I will do whatever it takes. But they were in the middle of producing the biggest movie they'd ever made at that point, which was John Carter. So they had this thing. Bob Iger did not ever have George Lucas say, well, you know, you guys have made the Barsoom novels, so you know, I don't want your John Carter, I don't want the Barsoom novels to interfere with what you would do with Star Wars. So basically, a $250 million movie, Bob Iger, they had to keep Andrew Stanton happy. They couldn't not release it. You couldn't then, I mean, yeah, you want Star Wars, but you also don't want to piss off Pixar, which is one of the most consistent. I mean, talk about a batting average. Pixar is probably the most, other than now the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the most consistent film company, or the most motion picture company ever. So what they had to do was they had to release John Carter. They had to finish it and they had to release it. But they didn't even want the very audience that might embrace John Carter to even know what it was. So the movie, if you look at the original key art, it was just called John Carter. If you didn't already know what the Barsoom novels was, they didn't even say from the beloved Barsoom series by Edgar Rice Burroughs. I mean, they didn't say any of that. They didn't call it A Princess of Mars. They didn't call it John Carter of Mars. They didn't call it John Carter, Warlord of Mars. There was even marketing department things saying, well, you know, like Mars needs moms. Movies with Mars in the title. Mission to Mars failed, so we're not going to have Mars in the title, which is about the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. But anyway, so they murdered the movie. They absolutely murdered it. They wanted it to go away so Bob Iger could say, George, yeah, we made this movie, but it didn't work for us. Star Wars is where it's at. Now, you might not believe that somebody would do that to a $250 million movie, but here's the question I would like to leave all of you imagination connoisseurs with. You're making a movie based on a book called The Princess of Mars. Why wouldn't you call it that? Okay, you're going to introduce John Carter as your action hero. John Carter, that's all you're going to call your movie? John Carter? There's nothing to indicate it's a science fiction film, nothing to indicate it was based on Edgar Rice Burroughs' famous Barsoom novels, which were the inspiration for Star Wars. But the most damning thing of all, Disney spends $250 million making a movie, and it is a Disney movie. Walt Disney. It's not Hollywood Pictures. There is not one piece of John Carter merchandise. None. There's no action figures. There's no stuffed Woola. There's nothing. And these toys have to be made in advance. You're making a $250 million movie that's coming from Andrew Stanton, who made WALL-E and Finding Nemo, and there's no merch? None? Why? That movie was killed. It was steamrollered, and it was done so Bob Iger could make sure that George Lucas had not a reason to say no when he made him an offer for $4 billion to buy Star Wars. Bob Iger was not going to take no for an answer, so he made sure that John Carter was never going to be a problem. That's just a theory. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? But anyway, that's my theory. This one comes from Lubna Kos. Lubna Kos. Hello. Thinking of what I wish to talk about, I know this will end up a mishmash of all kinds of things. It will be quite scatterbrained, which is a perfect representation of my personality and no anomaly, alas, and therefore scarcely suitable for public perusal. First off, on the subject of Bond songs, I know you do not care for The Writings on the Wall by Sam Smith. I actually like the cover used here much better. No offense to Mr. Smith. Well, since you gave me this link, I haven't seen this link, but I'm going to I'll put this in there. I'll put this link in there because, hey, why not? I'll put this link in the live chat because you sent it in. Here you go. Here it is. It's going into the live chat right now. There it is. There's the link. Naturally, I'm very biased in ways other than those of a Bond fan. It's probably yours, isn't it? Well, if it is yours, congratulations. Still, I thought you might like it. I'm quite new to your Robservations, and though our tastes may be dissimilar in many regards, I've still enjoyed them very much. What made me seek them out finally was your mention on the John Campea show, which is also something I'm relatively new to, of Space Legolas spending several episodes trapped in a corridor. I had to know more. I've not seen Star Trek Picard, nor do I care to, but I enjoyed your analysis of Episode 8 immensely, especially the tribulations and travails of poor Space Legolas, trapped in that corridor, fighting on bravely for days on end, without food or bathroom facilities, nor one expects that most vital of all commodities, toilet paper. It made me laugh out loud several times. Of course, I'm a Lord of the Rings fan, so that probably helps. I grew up reading the books in the 80s, and they are amongst my absolute favorite books. The films are my favorite films of all time. The extended editions, of course. And I must thank you for your work on the extra material. Those documentaries are nothing short of brilliant. I might add that I was just one of many people. We had a great team at Curdy Pellerin, and I'm very happy to have ever worked on those. The best compliment I can pay is to say that even the things I'm not really interested in, such as CGI, I was interested in. Loved it all. Thank you again. Some other things. Apropos the discussion the other day on the John Campea show regarding whether there is any difference between favorite and best, I quite concur with you. I absolutely think there is. For example, take Citizen Kane. Excellent film, not a favorite of mine, however. I don't dislike it, but I also didn't love it. I've seen it twice at least, and would have no problem watching it again, but I don't particularly hanker after it. I don't connect with it. You could say that I respect it. And then take one of the lesser-regarded films in the MCU as another example, Ant-Man and the Wasp. I adore this film. For me, it's an utter delight. I do too, actually. I love spending time with these characters. Is it one of the best films in the MCU? No, not really, but I don't care. I should also say that other favorites, I'm not much for ranking, are Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. I'm right there with you. Speaking of the MCU, the discussion the other day of whether there would be something in Black Widow that would be a must-see or later installments in the MCU would be incomprehensible. I'd rather say that the question is rather whether there is anything in the Falcon and Winter Soldier that could spoil Black Widow. Like seeing Far From Home before Endgame would spoil Endgame. As an example, and only an example, mind you, I'm not speculating, nor do I have any reason to think this would be so. What if Taskmaster reappears in Falcon and Winter Soldier with their identity known, spoiling the mystery of Black Widow? Good point. I think that there was something else I wanted to talk about, but I've forgotten. Thank goodness, you may be thinking to yourself. Still, before closing this epistle, I'll just mention the book I'm reading at present, namely, The Pleasures of Imagination by John Brewer. Well, that's interesting. That sounds right up my alley. The Pleasures of Imagination by John Brewer. I don't know that book, but that does sound good to me. Hang on, I'm gonna put this in the live chat. Here you go. This goes into the live chat. The Pleasures of Imagination by John Brewer. It's about culture and fine arts in 18th century England. This might sound very niche, but I don't think it is. It's for anyone who's interested in thoughtful analysis of the culture scene, literature, art, theater. I was quite surprised myself when I started reading this at how interesting I found it. I'm more of a fiction reader, and I don't specifically consider the 18th century my era. Although I've read some 18th century literature, I'm more at home in 19th century England. This is no dull recounting of names and dates, but a thorough look at all aspects of culture. What was thought about, what constituted good taste, and who had it? Where and how did people consume literature, art, theater, and who were they? I've made my way through print and paint, and I'm now perusing performance, i.e. the theater. This is going slower for me than I like. If I drag out a book too long and do not keep it at a reasonably brisk pace, I tend to lose interest. But this has not happened, and I don't think it will, however long it takes me, because the book is so heavy, physically I mean, and I only have my left hand available to hold the book. I'm visually impaired, and I need my right hand to hold my magnifying glass, and I can only read a couple of pages before having to put the book down and rest my hand. Anyway, I do highly recommend, even if it may not sound like something you're likely to enjoy, I do think you might know. It sounds amazing, and it sounds exactly like something I would enjoy, and I'd really like to read that, actually. Anyway, now I will really leave off. Thank you for providing good cheer and positivity in dire times like these, and please keep up the good work. Lubna. Well, Lubna, thank you for writing this letter. What a great letter. Man, Kung Fu and books from the 18th century or about the 18th century. I'd say this is a bang-up show today, fellows and ladies and all kinds of creatures and non-binary individuals and whoever you are. This is why I do this show, because, man, there's a lot of interesting stuff. Let's see what people are saying here over in the chat. Let's see. Oh, Stub McShave sent in a tip and says, "Hi, Rob. I went through all the stages of grief, anger, denial, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Dr. Kubler-Ross with a K for the new Star Wars trilogy. For me, I see the new Star Wars as not being a part of my headcanon. That may change if there's something good produced. In what stage of grief are you for the new Star Trek?" You know, I think I joke that we're in a hostage crisis. The Star Trek hostage crisis has been going on since 2007 when Bad Robot was able to take over the franchise, and really since 2009 when I saw Star Trek 09. And I feel, I don't know how long the hostage crisis is going to last. I mean, what's really interesting, here's something that that really bums me out. So I'm constantly trying to excavate the Robservatory here and excavate out and organize all of my stuff, because half of it's organized and half of it isn't. And I have so much stuff, and I'm trying to go through all this amazing amounts of crap and collectibles that I have, and I really don't need any of it. Like literally, I want to get rid of my comic books. You know, I've got all these long boxes of comic books, but I make this mistake of every time I start going through, I'm like, oh yeah, and I start reading stuff, and my comic books. There are comic books, especially when I get back into my '80s books when I was really buying comics every week and I was really heavily into it. I remember like, oh my God, I remember I went and saw this movie after I bought this it's a difficult thing to go through. But with Star Trek, I have all these reference books, and all of these. I used to love the lineage of ships. One of the things I really dislike about modern Star Trek since 2009, and I never thought this would happen, is I hate all of the ships. There hasn't been one starship, and I have a fetishistic attachment to Star Trek ships. The warp nacelles, the designs, the Enterprise specifically, the original Enterprise, and of course the motion picture Enterprise. But even in the movies, like I love the Reliant and the Grissom, the ship. Even in Next Generation, once I got used to the D, they reused things like the Excelsior model, and there was all kinds of different, the souped up tri-engine Enterprise D from All Good Things, the Nekvar class Klingon ships, the Vorcha class ships. I mean, I love the Cardassian Galar class warships. I still love Star Trek ships. Since 2009, I've hated all the design work. And I know John Eaves, who's done a lot of work, the man who designed the Enterprise E, which I love. I hate all the design work. And I don't understand. I really don't understand this weird, like I get it. People say, well, Brian Fuller really wanted to make the Klingons different, more alien. So you got this sarcophagus ship. But you think about the Klingon D7 battlecruiser, that we saw in the 3rd season of Star Trek in the Enterprise incident when the Enterprise was surrounded. And that's one of the great ship designs, science fiction ship designs of all time. And I know they've brought it back in Discovery after they called something else a D7. But I really hate all that design work. And it's funny, it's such a small thing. Well, maybe not it's a small thing, but that's one of the problems I have with modern Star Trek is the design sensibility it doesn't work to me. I mean, most people don't care. But when you've grown up with this lineage of design and there's so many books tracking this lineage, and that was all part of the fun of being a Star Trek fan. They've removed that part of my fandom. That part of my fandom following the lineage, loving the design of these ships. I mean, they got rid of form and function. Like when you think about Andy Probert and Mike Miner, when Andy Probert was designing the motion picture refit, everything worked. The motion picture refit of the Enterprise was such a beautiful and elegant reimagining of the original Enterprise. It was still obviously the Enterprise from the original series, but way cooler. But it worked. It wasn't too much of a radical redesign. Everything worked. It was thought about, And the modern Star Trek just got rid of. So that part of my fandom, which is deep, the blueprints and the ships, that was removed entirely. Forget the stories, forget the optimism, the design sensibility. And remember, who signs off on this? The director. And putting starships in space or having them built on in the water, in the oceans, like the Enterprise would somehow land in the water. I just, that kind of stuff, I'm like, fuck, I'm out, dude. I'm just out. Having starships operate in the gravity well of planets, those kinds of ships. I mean, come on, man. I mean, sure, that started before Star Trek, but the Constitution class ships they don't have the ability to, not the drive sections and all that, but whatever. I've been going through these stages of grief since 2009. And I hope, I don't know if some other, I can't stand the Discovery costumes. And then they try and get, no, this is canonical. I understand what they were trying to do. What they were trying to do was completely reimagine Star Trek and say it takes place, this is actually the same universe. It's just a visual reimagining. That's why they reimagined the Enterprise. And they're like, this Enterprise, it doesn't look really, sure, the silhouette might vaguely look like the Enterprise, but it's our Enterprise. What they decided to do was, They just went back and decided to reimagine all of Star Trek from the ground up and say, yes, this is canonical. All the events happened, but it's not the same universe. And that to me is not a reinvention. Like, if they were going to reinvent things, you could go back and you could redesign the costumes, and they would be redolent of those costumes. The colors might be a little different. The cut is weird, but even those weird the collars, they're asymmetrical. What the fuck is that? Like, who looked at that and went, yeah, that's what we're going to do? It just looks stupid. Like, why would you, looking at clothes design throughout, I don't know, since ever, why would you make that with that weird asymmetrical collar? I look at that and I go, I bump on that every time. I look at that and I'm like, that just looks dumb. I don't buy it. And all of the choices, the costume design, everything about the way these shows look, I disagree with. Not because I want things to look like they looked in the 60s. I get it. But you can make things look redolent of that and update them. But anyway, they don't care. So I've been going through the stages of grief for Star Trek since 2009. I know that was a long-winded answer to the question, but Emil Johansson sends in a super chat and says, my add to the conversation is make a new tragedy in the present for the Avengers or whatever to deal with that spawns a new Eric, meaning Eric Lensher Magneto. That's an interesting choice. I think that's really, why not? You could create your own version of that, something modern in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I like that idea. Bunyan Snipe says that the 1967 film was a remake of the 1958 TV version of Quatermass in the Pit. That is correct. I stand corrected. That is true. I was wrong, because remember, those versions, or was it on TV or was it a radio show? But yes, I think you're right about that. You're right. That is correct. You are correct. I am wrong about that. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. See, I have no problem being corrected when I'm wrong. Broovies with Matt. Good to see you. Long-time imagination connoisseur. Hey, Rob, I enjoyed our friendly Trek discussion on Twitter earlier. I always respect your opinions and like that you are willing to hear others. I don't understand why people wouldn't be. It's so strange to me. Mukbang Reviews. And by the way, thanks for still being here, Broovies. One day we'll have brew and watch movies together. Mukbang Reviews sends in a super chat and says, thanks for broadcasting through this worrisome time. We have piss poor and corrupt leadership. I have spoken. I don't know, man. I'm not seeing a lot of, when I find it, that reporter, we all saw the clip of the CNN reporter who said to Donald Trump, what is it you would say to a lot of scared Americans? I know, I live with one. That was a moment, in my mind, he was lobbed an easy pitch to hit one out of the park, where he could have stepped up and said something that would have gone down in history. If he had a good answer for that, it could have gone down in history. Instead, he's like, basically, fuck you, fuck your news organization. And I'm like, wow. Anybody who could think extemporaneously and really had something going on could have taken that moment and ran with it. I was very disappointed in that, actually. But it's a bummer. Eric Gantz sent in a super chat. Thank you, by the way. Idea. Make the first X-Men film a period piece taking place in the 60s, then use the quantum realm to comic-explain them into the present, and wait until the second or third film to introduce the giant-sized team, meaning the giant-sized X-Men, the modern team, the team with Storm. That's not a bad idea. I mean, that's what I liked about X-Men First Class, is they went back to the 60s, but I think that's a little too cumbersome. I'm thinking, though, that Wanda Maximoff and the Multiverse of Madness is going to have something to do with all of that. We shall see. And that might be why the tie-in is why the Scott Derrickson left as a director. Wiley tipped and says, Robert, I began watching the James Bond movies for the first time. Wow, you hadn't seen any of them. And even doing a show called James Bond First Watch. I love them. I just finished Octopussy, but my question is, what's your favorite and least favorite Bond film? And maybe you can come on the show. I'd love to come on that show. Bring me on your show. I'll go. Well, it's, I always talk about, I don't think I could bring, I love the James Bond franchise. And even the bad movies I like to watch. I find something to like about them. But as I've said before, I think from Russia with Love is probably the purest distillation of Ian Fleming's novels. Goldfinger is probably my favorite Connery Bond. I love From Russia with Love. I love Thunderball. I like You Only Live Twice. I really love On Her Majesty's Secret Service. My favorite Roger Moore Bond is Spy Who Loved Me. But I do like Moonraker, and I do like For Your Eyes Only. I like The Living Daylights. It's my favorite of the Dalton duology, or two Dalton movies. I like GoldenEye. I do like Tomorrow Never Dies, and I think The World Is Not Enough is a better Bond movie than it gets credit for. People think Denise Richards and Tune Out, and I really love Casino Royale a lot, and I'm a Quantum of Solace apologist, and I'm not a big fan of Skyfall. I know, terrible, and I really don't like Spectre. So there you go. Stub McShave sends in a tip and said, the dimming of Beetlejuice gave me an idea for a sci-fi story. It involves interdimensional entities that humanity made a deal with, which makes faster-than-light travel possible. A civil war between these entities disrupts faster-than-light travel. A Beetlejuice supernova is central to the story. For those of you who don't know what Stubble McShave is talking about, they have been observing the star Beetlejuice as undergoing weird oscillations and craziness, and they don't know why. And there is a theory that it's going to go supernova. I kind of hope it does, because we'll probably be able to see it. But that means, of course, it blew up a long, long, long time ago. Poor Beetlejuice and any creatures that might have been living in the vicinity. Mukbang Reviews sends in a super chat. You've been very generous today, sir. Thank you. Yes, I'm seeing films right small on the TV box since our New York City theaters are off limits. Invisible Man still creep me out. What you're saying is, you've been watching the TV and downloading first-run movies like Invisible Man, which is cool because that's a good thing to do. Because theaters are off limits. Invisible Man still creep me out almost as much as Detective Jim Boyers, one of our great moderators. The score had me looking behind my back. Yeah, man. It's great stuff. Throg American Gigolo sends in a tip and says, sorry I'm late. I'm starting from the beginning. Mark Chure sent a super chat and said, if Rosario Dawson is cast as Ahsoka Tano, is it possible that Sasha Banks was cast to play Sabine Wren? I don't know. That could be kind of cool. By the way, the Twitterati, including the woman that wrote the Rise of Skywalker novelization, have been going, she's been under attack, Rosario Dawson. Apparently somebody in her family made transphobic comments or something, and people are going after her. I don't know what the story is there. I just heard about it, so that's too bad. Mark C. sent in another super chat and said, many hate him and many think of him as controversial, but you really need to listen to Ethan Van Sciver's live stream from earlier today where he laments on the death of the comic industry. Oh, I would love to. Yeah, Ethan Van Sciver and I don't always park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay, but I would do that. This is Luke Reichelt. Luke Reichelt? I hope I get that right. Luke Reichelt? Right? Luke Reichelt? Hey, Rob, I am loving Elizaviews. Elizabeth seems more relaxed every show. You guys are great. Your pithy end catchphrase could be, Elizabeth, remember, everywhere you go, Rob, there you are. Good night, folks. That's, of course, from Buckaroo Banzai. Wow, these online communities are getting more and more important. You do a great job. I've been living in self-isolation for years, and I don't read the news or have social media, so my life hasn't actually changed at all, except there's unusual empty space on the supermarket shelves where toilet paper used to be. Willow's mom is right. Why just toilet paper? What about pet food and things essential to survive? It makes no sense. I woke up and went to the shops one day last week, oblivious to the situation, and it looked like a Monty Python sketch. Everyone running around with excessive quantities of toilet paper. Paranoid and frantic. What in the world? What the Christ? What the devil? I exclaimed. Then I quickly called a friend who explained everything to me. It's madness. As my all-time favorite superhero, The Tick, would say, unsettling trend. I've uploaded my pop vinyl video to your website. I hope you and the Post-Geek Singularity get a kick out of it. There's 2 Easter eggs. See if you can find Waldo. And also, there's a few frames of Game of Thrones Funko Pop pornography. I don't know how it got there. You censored me last message. All I said was somewhere in my video is the Night King paradoxically having anal sex with himself. It's true. That's in my video. It's hot. Talk soon, Luke. P.S. You have permission to edit this email for clarity, not to take out the Night King sex stuff. Leave it in, dude. Love you, Rob. Luke, how could I ever talk about hot, sweaty Night King on Night King action? What would Willow Yang do if I left something like that out? What would Vesna do? What would Paula do if I ever not reference hot man-on-man love action? So, anyway, that's what. Thank you, Luke, for writing that in. I appreciate that. That would be interesting. I would be interested to hear more about your self-isolation, actually. I think that might be sort of interesting. Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring this chat to a close. It's been a rollicking good time for me. What a bunch of great letters. I've still got a ton more I got to get through. But I can't make my moderators sit here all day long. And by the way, I have to finish this video I'm making. I was sent a very interesting product out of the blue to review, to look at. And it's the first time a company asked me to do something like that. And I was very flattered. So I've been working on this video where I'm kind of playing with this new piece of technology, home theater technology, and I like it. And you know, they didn't ask me to do a video, but I figured if anybody is going to send me a product like this, I'll make a video of it. Why not? I mean, they sought me out. I didn't even know this company was even aware of my channel's existence. But they found me and they asked me if I would take a look at this particular product, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a separate video. It's not going to be a live video because I'm going to edit it because I want it to be good. And I figured, look, if you're going to send me a piece of equipment that is fairly substantial, I will review it. I'll do a review. Now, I'm not saying that I am going to love it. I don't know. I'm going to give you an honest I'm going to give you an honest appraisal. People are like, you Rob coughed. I will give you an honest appraisal of the situation. But I will say this. I'm pretty impressed with this piece of equipment, and you will be too. And I think it's something imagination connoisseurs might dig because I find it to be utilitarian. So it's very cool. But anyway, I'm going to bring episode number 368 of Robservations to an end. I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank all of you for very generously supporting the channel, especially in this time when any kind of support, I know it means such a great deal to me and to Elizabeth, by the way, somebody who's watched her income collapse to zero, which is not good when you're in a household with teenage girls. But I want to thank you for that. Thank you for supporting the channel. And I also want to thank everybody for writing in letters and comments and all that and sending in videos. I will get to videos I haven't played. As I promise, I just want to make sure that I'm going to put myself on notice. Johnny Millennium, who sent me in a video, wanted me, I'm sorry I didn't see it in time, but it's about, I would assume it's about Buckaroo Banzai. Happy Console Gamer is how you might know him on the YouTube. I heard he's a big YouTuber, which flatters me even more that he would send it in, but I can't wait to play it. That will be first up tomorrow on tomorrow's episode of Robservations, episode number 369, dude. Lamau. That's out. That goes out. That shout out goes to Davey504, who's been putting out some funny videos lately. And I'm a big fan of Davey504. I've also been watching a lot of Genic. Genic's YouTube channel, him of the airbrush. He's like the greatest airbrush model painter ever. And I get mesmerized watching his videos of him painting Gundam models. And Elizabeth gave me a airbrush for Christmas. That's all I wanted. I have yet to break it open, but I got so many models I want to work on. I mean, I've got that 3-foot Star Destroyer that I want to build, that Randy Cooper resin Star Destroyer. I should do anyway, I'm getting into the weeds. I just want to thank all of my moderating staff, Mayor Mike Bodden, who's going crazy with this crisis. I want to thank Detective Jim Boyers for being Detective Jim Boyers. I just love that we have a detective moderating this. It's so great. And we have renewed interest, Detective Jim. We're going to England. We're going to work it out. We'll figure it out. Get that passport, dude. We've also got Greg Smith. We've got Jordy Lyons. And, of course, we've got the great Lewis Yu for our moderating staff. And don't forget the Richard, who does so much for the channel, who runs the Eliza Views watch parties now. So I guess he's going to put one on tomorrow. Go find the Richard. He's always on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page. There's also an Eliza Views Whining About Movies Facebook page. So go join and look. We're just building the community. You can obviously follow me on Twitter or find me on Instagram or here. But you already know I'm here, so you're here. So anyway, I want to thank you all for being here. And remember, I guess I should probably go to full frame. I've been full frame for a while, or even go wider. Go to the let's just kick back and have that wide angle. I should add more cameras. I can, and I'll start letting Gilbert and Tallulah in and go to dog cam, and I'd love to have hot toy cam. I mean, it's all in a state of flux, but I got more stuff I can add, and I'm doing it. I'm excited. But anyway, I want to thank you all for being here, and remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do really is listen. And with that, I bring an end to Robservations episode number 368. Robservations, a show about something. I am your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. And if I had a co-host, I guess I would throw it to them and they would take us out. But I won't. I'll take us out ourselves. Remember, everywhere you go, there you are. But have a better day.